Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Milan Podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo, alongside our very special guest. I think you've been on the channel before, Kush. If not, we've been doing content, the three of us together, for a couple of years now. That's how fast everything's gone by. But, gentlemen, how are the both of you? Let's, I guess, start off with whoever wants to say hello first.
Well, I mean, you said that I've been here maybe once. I've been here a bunch of times, bro. I think
Dude, I can't even remember because it's like, because I'm thinking of like the official Milan podcast or That Milan pod as opposed to just like the YouTube in general.
Oh, right. Yes,
right?
I haven't been on this
Like, it's
one.
just a Milan Reports. There's just been so many different
Correct.
things over the
Yeah.
years. So, yeah.
I remember I was here. I was on your podcast with you guys when I just cracked 100 subscribers on YouTube. I was at like 90 or 89.
Really?
Yeah, it was
And
on the
you're
podcast.
soaring, dude.
Yeah,
Right now.
it's reaching the next milestone now, the next major one.
It's 10K,
But
right?
yeah. But that was my 100th subscriber came on your podcast, so I have good memories. I remember I was here more.
Was it that low? Well, anyway, Santangelo, what do you recall from that? Because that's so far ago. 9.15K.
Martino's basically saying, "Kush, you have a forgettable face." That's kind of what he's trying to say here. How could you forget? How could you forget Kush? The backdrop, the hair, man. He's got the style. Man. This has been years with us.
What do you? No, you're.
Oh no, it's been awesome. I remember actually Kush came on and we were trying to, when he was like kind of trying to get 100. We were saying like, go subscribe right now. I think it was maybe a live stream or something. It's been awesome to see Kush, your channel grow, and I pop over into the comments and I'm starting to read that people really love the content you put out. So it's been
solid, man. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys having me on to bring my 100 subscriber. Sometimes you need those milestones.
Dude, that's so crazy. I thought it would have been like 1K. I remember it now though.
You know what's the weird thing? This is the actual kicker. 100 happened on your podcast, and then 1,000 also happened on your podcast. So it's both.
So I mean,
I guess I gotta guarantee. Let's kick it up by 850 today.
Yeah, I can't guarantee that from this one, because if you got 150 subs from this, then I should probably just hit 5K at this point. So, but it would be great. I mean, the content's been fantastic. You've evolved and grown so much over the past few years. We always talk about it all the time. I'm a new light because of you, so we're always talking about equipment and those sorts of things. But yeah, we're here to talk Milan because that's usually all we do when we end up talking with one another. But it's been a crazy ride this season, from all the U.S. men's national team supporters joining along board. That's been a heavy topic on your videos. You've been very popular on the subreddit as well. Actually, I think both of our channels have gotten great responses. So shout out to everybody on Reddit if you're tuning in now. Kush and I think we could both speak for each other when we say we greatly appreciate all the support on there. So yeah, we're here to talk about a bunch of different news now. We're getting off this international break. Probably the biggest news so far that we've seen outside of fake ratings into Casa Milan for whatever the hell it is. Olivier Giroud is on his way out, gentlemen. We kind of knew this would happen because of his age and how he's had a desire to play in MLS. That was widely reported for a pretty long time. But at this rate, you knew when you saw reports from Matteo Moretto, Fabrizio Romano, and these other top Milan guys saying that Milan didn't even reach out for an extension. And when you're in late March and you don't reach out for an extension for a player who's expiring in June, the writing's on the wall, so to say. So, Matt, I'll go to you first with this. Your initial thoughts on Giroud heading to MLS. Our good friend Tom Bogert actually broke this story. I woke up to it the other day. So your initial thoughts on Giroud leaving, and then Kush, we'll get to you and what you thought of it as well.
It's not surprising. I think, look, when we signed Giroud a couple seasons ago on a free transfer not a free transfer, but basically peanuts, right, at the time. And we had an understanding of what we were getting with him, a veteran presence to go along with then Ibrahimovic, and, eventually to maybe be the guy once Ibrahimovic left, as like kind of that locker room, that veteran presence up front for a lot of the younger players we had in the team. But I think when we look at his 3 seasons with us and we look at his age, I don't think anyone in their wildest dreams expected him to throw on the number 9 shirt and be suddenly putting up double-digit goals all 3 seasons, scoring crucial goals. AC Milan France, a couple of years ago, posted off the back of the Scudetto win, showing, what he accomplished in 2022. And I mean, not only just the goals and the assists, but like the timing, obviously the brace against Inter, the brace on the final match day against Sassuolo to seal the Scudetto. So not only has he scored the goals and delivered, but he's also had the moments, and he's basically broke the curse of the number 9 shirt. I know a couple comps were put out there highlighting, all the misery we've dealt with that number. So to see him sort of right off in the sunset at this point, I know we would have liked to win a Scudetto, and maybe in his departure, we're still in the Europa League, of course, so that'd be great to maybe send him off with a trophy if we can manage that. But I think it's the proper end to a cycle here. I think that while the numbers show that he's still productive and he's had a very good year, I mean, goals and assists wise, there aren't many in Serie A better than him from a number standpoint. I know the numbers can be a little bit skewed and the context does matter. He's slowing down. You can see it. He slows down to maybe the way we're trying to play. When we bring certain guys on like Okafor or even a Luka Jovic, we seem to have a little bit more pep in our step and be able to spring forward and play a little bit more dynamic football. So when you kind of throw everything together, the fact that you mentioned, they didn't really reach out to him for an extension, I think it was sort of that mutual understanding that, hey, like this is the time to kind of part ways. You want to go to MLS. You want to get that experience in America. Totally understandable. He's still productive. He strikes me as the guy that would love that experience in LA, which is what reports are saying he's headed to. So I'm fine with it. This is a player that I'd love to see succeed in MLS, but I'm also really grateful for the years he had at Milan. And I think, it's a testament to his professionalism, the way he was able to carry himself on the pitch and off it. But also, again, the fact that he had such great moments with us in a couple of years, it feels like a player that's been with us for more than 3 years. And I think it's a testament to the type of career he's had. So wishing him all the best. And I'm hoping that we can end the season strong. Maybe we can win something, but, kind of counting down the days with him, unfortunately, because I do see this one obviously getting over the line, barring a collapse in the deal.
Kush, surprised there was no reach out for an offer even to consider for Milan, or you kind of align with Matt's thoughts here that, it's time?
I mean, it's a great career at Milan. It's definitely time. I think it was probably time last season if Divock Origi would have kicked in gear and would have actually started scoring goals. I think Giroud was supposed to not even be here for the last 2 seasons in a way. I mean, maybe contractually, but not actually on the field playing that many minutes. It's almost a testament to Milan's poor recruitment in the attacking phase, where they haven't been able to find the right striker to replace this guy. That's kind of prolonged his career here. Now, should he have been, given an extension or some type of a conversation? Yeah, maybe you could say that, but football is a ruthless game. I guess you kind of ghost somebody. We don't know if they told him that, hey, look, we're not going to be re-signing you, so figure out your future. We're not giving any type of an extension. But if reports say that he wasn't even connected with, then that's, I guess, a little bit sad. What I do think is, I was a little bit concerned that at least last season, I was a little bit more concerned and felt like maybe Giroud should stay on longer, because it was important to have that locker room presence, having that veteran striker, won a World Cup, all the experience that he has on different, in different leagues, that would come in handy for the younger strikers. But the fact that Ibrahimovic is now back in the management side, I feel like we kind of have that part covered. We have a good striker who can tell these players how to be a good attacker. So I'm actually okay with Giroud leaving. I think his career was great here. He completely overdid anybody's expectation. I think they bought him for €1 million. Yeah. As I've talked about with, Kalulu, I've sold houses more expensive than that in Canada. So it's, I think it was way better than what we expected. The only question is, what happens to the number 9 curse now? Is that going to kick back into effect? That's the concern.
See, look, that's how good of a YouTuber Kush is, because he just gives the segue on a podcast he's not even hosting it. Basically, this is the big question. Because also we look to loaned out players, right? Lorenzo Colombo is just simply not somebody that, like, even if he were to come back, is going to be replacing what Giroud is doing. Luka Jovic, there are still some questions in terms of his extension. It's not as simple as, oh yeah, Milan's going to trigger it and a very favorable salary, where, you know, Jovic could maybe go elsewhere and get more money. And then again, with Noah Okafor, yes, he's played well as a striker, but he's also featured on the left wing. He has an injury history, and he's not also the greatest of goal scorers. So there is those questions being raised at this time. They've been linked to quite a few players. We've discussed them on the channel. Benjamin Sesko, Joshua Zirkzee being the primary two players that they have been linked with. Jonathan David, also hailing from Canada. So to me, it kind of comes down to the opportunity and what Milan are going to be working with in a budget. Yesterday, I was sharing the graphic from Sempre Milan about how the club could potentially be having a budget very similar to 130 million, what it was last year. But that also is dependent upon if they win Europa League. Europa League could see them collect 40 million based off of multiple factors. They are just winning the tournament, getting into the Super Cup, and so on. And with that, Milan still have quite a few holes. They don't have a number 6. They don't have a right back for the long term. I'm not sure if you guys agree with that, but I have a feeling you do. And so with that, and again, a center back as well. So with that, it kind of gets into an interesting area in where Milan should be spending their money, how much they should be spending in that position as well. Is it as simple to say that they should pony up 40 million for a Joshua Zirkzee or even 50 million release clause of Benjamin Sesko? Or do you go with the more opportunistic shopping of a Jonathan David for a lesser price because he has 1 year left on his contract? Matt, I'll go to you first. With Giroud here, what is the best replacement? Because we're pretty much, with all the names linked here, getting a player who is a lot more physically capable over the course of a 38-match season in Serie A. So what are you kind of looking for here in terms of physicality and skill and so on?
So we did a couple of videos, Martino, right? We did highlighting, profiling Zirkzee, Sesko, fit, price, kind of discussing everything, unpacking both hypothetical deals for the two, right? And I think I went more with the Sesko approach because I feel like overall, like the physicality, the potential upside to be like a prolific, more volume goal scorer was something that really appealed to me. But the more I look at Zirkzee, the more I look at the potential cost, and the more I ultimately look at fit, I feel like Zirkzee would be the more preferred option here. And I think Sempre Milan broke it down quite well on their recent podcast. I think they had a listener question come in, and it was pretty much saying, like, you know, who would you prefer? And I think they looked at Zirkzee as more of a player that, while he may not be a guy that can get you 20 goals, 22, 23 goals, that they looked at the way he played and how he could play within a potential system that we have that could elevate a Leao to a different height, or Pulisic or Okafor, to the point where when you look at your attack, if you're able to get 50 or 50 goals from your attacking players, that's great production. I mean, do you want a guy that, yeah, maybe he can give you 18 goals, but it's like 1 or 2 assists, like a maybe, you know, like someone like how we've seen with Giroud. I know he's got a lot of assists, but more generally speaking, like just like goal scorer that it's in the box, he'll take his chances, but outside of the box, he's a little bit more limited. Or do you go with a more athletic, versatile, technical player who can get you maybe 12-8 versus 17-2? And he really elevates the way you play football collectively. And I look at Zirkzee and I feel like he kind of fits that box more than Sesko. You guys might have your feelings otherwise, but I think that Zirkzee also, given that we've seen him thrive in a year here at Bologna under Thiago Motta, there's also like that little bit less risk, in my view, that a player that's clearly had success in this league that can be difficult for young players to score, let alone veteran players as well. So with all that being said, I feel like Zirkzee is the guy that Milan have earmarked. All reports indicate that to be true. 35 to 40 feels like in this market about right for someone his age. You know, you're paying for what maybe you're going to be getting in a couple of years versus what he's already proven. Although, again, it's 1 year and he's done well. I think you're trying to get ahead of the curve, right? I think, we discussed, a couple of years ago, would you pay 60 million for Vlahovic? And some people maybe said, hey, look, you pay 60 now. If he explodes another year, it's 80, 90, 100. Now you're priced out. So I think Xerxes feels like the guy for me if it's amongst the three names that we've kind of been discussing here.
Kush, do you want a pure goal scorer, or do you want somebody a little bit similar to Xerxes in the whole build-up play and all that?
Yeah, with the current dynamic of the sport, I think you need someone in line with what Matt's saying. You know, the analogy of 17 goals and 2 assists or 12 goals and 8 assists. Definitely, I prefer somebody 12 goals and 8 assists. It just brings your whole team up. You're not dependent as much on one player to finish. It kind of elevates everybody's game. I can't really add much more to that. I think for me, also the preferred player is Xerxes. I think he's a physical specimen as well. He's kind of like that Ibrahimovic frame and size. I like that. At the same time, he's succeeded in a way in Serie A as well. So he has that experience, and I think that goes a long way. Naturally, being Canadian, it would be nice to see Jonathan David. The fact that his contract expires in 2025, there might be a little bit more wiggle room on negotiation. His performances this season haven't been the best up until much more recently. Yeah. So that would be another profile. But I think realistically, or the preferred profile would probably be Joshua Xerxes.
Yeah, Xerxes is interesting because I think out of all three players that we just mentioned, he's easily the most consistent. Jonathan David, his numbers, if you look at them in a vacuum, or if you track them through an entire season, he'll go missing for quite some time. And it's not so much about his ability. It's that and the team he plays on. Like, Lille is not the type of club that keeps talent consistently that would help a striker like that per se. But sometimes you see some of his misses and you're like, dear Lord.
I believe also David takes penalties for them too, right? Do we know if he takes penalties? Because I think that's also important too, right? Well, yeah, like people will in the conversation with Leao talk about his goal scoring and question it, but typically a lot of the premier attacking players on most of the teams in Serie A and in world football.
Xerxes doesn't even take them for Bologna.
Xerxes doesn't even take them. So I think like that kind of has to be considered as well. And I just not to completely throw you off there, Martino, but I agree with you. I think the purple patches, he goes through these stretches where he could put goals together, but like, what's the weight of those goals, right? Are they like tying games? Are they winning games with them? Or is it just like, hey, he has a 2-month, 3-month stretch every year where he gets hot, but then he goes missing for large stretches of the season. So I think when I look at Xerxes, I've seen his entire season. I'm thinking like, even in games where he's not scoring, he's having an impact where he's setting up an Orsolini or Ferguson or, combining with other players. And I think that is really has an importance here if we're trying to kind of move the needle with the way we want to play.
I think, in defense of Jonathan David, at the end of the day, we need to know that he can put the ball in the back of the net. Yeah. If he does it in a draw, if he does it in a 4-0 scoreline and he's a fifth goal scorer, at the end of the day, we need that. Sure. We need to then bring him into the fold and then kind of cultivate his personality. And a lot of that comes on the teammates and most importantly, the coach. But I don't know if that's a thread we want to pull on. Right?
That's you know plenty about the contest out there. Pioli is like 10 hours alone. But I think you're right. There's just so many different ways to go about this. I don't necessarily think any option is a poor one, but I think there are higher potentials for some of them. Again, we have to reiterate, they have not had a 20 goal scorer in a league since Ibrahimovic left when he had that 28 goal season.
The closest
Baca was the closest.
18, maybe 17.
Yeah, at 18, correct. Yeah. So you're also talking about that. I don't even foresee Xerxes taking penalties. I think that would get switched to Pulisic or Theo Hernandez. I don't really see him coming in for that. There's certain things with the way Xerxes plays sometimes. He drops a little bit too deep for me, which could kind of get frustrating because then the two players who are up front are Rafael Leao
and Ruben.
You said it there. As much as I love Ruben, there's way too many inconsistencies with those players up top. And so as much as it could be really nice having a player who's great with link up, he's a great dribbler as well, and the pressing would be fine. I want my goal scorer closer to the net. I don't want you dropping back as deep as some of these players do, or like he does with Bologna. Then again, Pioli's formation from time to time, right? It's a 3-0-7, as a lot of the fans would like to say, where there's really nobody centrally. For me, ultimately, it kind of comes down to price. Shocker with Milan. We aren't going to be foreseeing Bayern Munich coming into the picture here because they would have to trigger that clause and probably resell him. They have Harry Kane. The fit just really doesn't make sense for them business-wise. It would waste too much time. For Bologna, there's also the factor of Alexis Salamakers in here. The clause is potentially 10 million if they choose to do that. But again, if they want these negotiations to go a little bit smoother for Milan, do Milan come back down on a number on Salamakers where it's not necessarily 10? Is it a little bit less for them to accept the deal with Xerxes? Benjamin Sesko, it's 50 million regardless. With the issues that Milan have currently in holes in other positions, I kind of don't see them going in that direction as much as I would love it. And so again, that kind of just goes with the conversation of how many teams actually are in the race for Joshua Xerxes, how many can outbid Milan in that sense. And if they do get outbid, I think that puts them back to Jonathan David because that's the more opportunistic deal for them. If you would have to put it on a Kush scale here that you do in your videos, is this more of a serious signing? Like, do you think it comes down to Xerxes coming to Milan for like 40 million plus the Salamakers? Or is it they get outbid and Jonathan David comes in? What do you think is the more likely of this scenario? And then, Matt, I'll get your take on that.
I'll be honest, man. It's really difficult to say because the sample size of this management that we've seen in the last transfer window, essentially,
Sure.
They do everything quietly, or most of the things. We haven't really had any inkling that some of these players are getting signed. So for all we know, these are all like the profiles we're discussing, but they're thinking some random guy who's going to cost them 22 million playing in some league that we haven't even heard of that much, because that's just the way that this management has operated. True. Now, of the two, I guess you could say maybe fiscally speaking, probably Jonathan David would be a little cheaper, but it's tough to say. I hope it's Xerxes. Let me just say that.
Matt, do you agree that Xerxes would be one of those signings relative to like a Jonathan David? I think Jonathan David, to a large majority of the fan base, would be perceived as an underwhelming signing, despite the fact that he has some potential. I feel like Xerxes, and either of you could disagree with this, I think that puts a little bit more of a jolt into the fan base. Like, hey, we're not selling these key players here. There could be like a Kalulu sale, for example, right? But this is just semantics. When you add Xerxes on top of to what they have already, I think that would be more of a hey, this is a serious project. We're trying to do a lot more for this club, and we're not kind of like going for the opportunistic deals, right? Because I think Jonathan David would be kind of signaling more of the same of what they've done, instead of like, hey, what you were just saying, you pay up now and he's going to be worth a lot more in the future, because that's the sort of potential that he has. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think that, you can draw maybe some comparisons to the way they acquire Rafael Leao, right? I mean, Rafael Leao didn't cost Milan 15 million. He cost Milan near 30 million. And people were looking like, doesn't have a large body of work scoring. He didn't have 2 to 3 years under his belt as a serious top player. Again, it was an investment for a player that had a lot of upside for the future that would be, in the event that someone came in, you're selling him for top dollar. And obviously, lo and behold, that's what we have here, right? So there's that insurance. And I kind of look at it the same way with Xerxes and Sesko more than a Jonathan David. I have a little bit more pause and caution with Jonathan David because I think that, he kind of feels like a player that would be the safer route. And if it fails, there's a little bit more of like a one and done. I mean, they got Piontek for 35 million and they got rid of him very quickly to Hertha Berlin for 27. So that strikes me as more of that type of deal where if they got a David and it didn't work out and they know it's not going to work out, they would pull the plug and try to just cut their losses, because of the point being that, he's got 1 year left on his contract. They can probably get out from underneath that and move on if it's not working. The one thing I think about with this next signing in this position is not just taking just the player into the conversation, is the entire corpse of our attack, right? Because Jovic looks like he's coming back on a very cheap, inexpensive deal. And by all accounts, that was a pretty good signing for us. Cost us relatively nothing. He delivered a decent amount of goals for us. It's been totally fine for us. He's still young, so you're not going to have that issue. I look at it and I'm thinking, do I like Xerxes, Jovic, Okafor, and I don't know what's happening with Camarda. Maybe Camarda squeezes in a little bit more as like a fallback option if we have injuries, which Lord knows we will. Or do you like a Sesko, Jovic, Okafor? And I'm looking at it, I'm thinking to myself, Xerxes feels like he gives us a little bit different look from a Jovic or from a Giroud, where I feel like Sesko, Jovic, like how much different you're going to play with those two players. So I feel like I'm still kind of leaning in that camp of Xerxes feels like the guy for me. Regardless, there's going to be pressure on whoever arrives, right? Whether it's a number 9 jersey or whatever, that player still is going to have to produce. So the question that fans have to ask themselves is which player feels right to themselves, because ultimately we can criticize and judge a player to be a can't miss player. We did that with CDK. We're like, wow, we got CDK. Like, this is the guy they've wanted. And it was a disaster. So I feel like that's kind of where the conversation goes from this point, is who has the highest floor, where it's like it's safe. Maybe year 1 he struggles a little bit, like a right layout, but he finds his footing and he takes that next step.
Yeah, going to be a fascinating summer for Milan, but it looks like all but guaranteed a new striker coming in. Yeah. So speaking of important fixtures and Luka Jovic, Jovic from Fiorentina. Looking at this Fiorentina fixture list, and it has a lot to do with the Roma fixture in the Europa League as well. There's a lot of parallels here. First of all, unfortunately, the passing of Joe Barone was devastating for them. He was a massive figure in Brooklyn sports, working with the Cosmos, well beloved in Italy as well. Sadly passed away. So their match that they were scheduled to play against Atalanta was postponed. And if you look at what their schedule is coming up, guys, it's pretty daunting for them. So on the 30th, this Saturday, Milan travel to Fiorentina to face them on the 30th. And then they have to play that makeup game on April 3rd against Atalanta. Then on the 7th, they go and face Juventus. And then on April 11th, they play Victoria Pleasant in the Conference League. That's a pretty daunting schedule the next couple of weeks for a team that hopes to make a European competition next season, as well as, trying to win the Conference League, which they lost in the final last year. There's been rumors that Italiano is leaving at the end of the summer, at the start of the summer, excuse me. So there's a lot going on with this club right now. They've played okay. Whenever you watch Fiorentina, they're one of those sides that create a lot, but their finishing is just horrendous. Jonathan Ikone is probably the poster child for that. Every time you watch them, this guy creates and gets into space and then has one of the worst finishes you'll ever see in your life. With that, they always play Milan tough, guys, especially in the Vincenzo Italiano era. Kush, how are you feeling heading into this fixture? There's no Teo Hernandez for this one, so we're not truly sure who's going to be starting left back yet. Could just be Florenzi going on to the left side, but Calabria starting on the right. What would you want to see in terms of Teo replacement here, and how are you feeling heading into this one?
I think, just like Fiorentina, Milan also has a pretty tough stretch for the next 3 to 4 weeks. So it's going to be an interesting time, I guess, for all teams. Essentially, it's the tail end of the season. This is the business end of the season. There are, I think, 6-7 games undefeated in all competitions. So they're definitely not a team that is losing. Now, when it comes to Milan, they have their issues with Hernandez's absence. That element of, Leao and Teo were just kicking it off now in the last maybe 3 weeks of the year. And they were looking like they're in good form. Now we're going to be having that piece missing. I think naturally you would think that Florenzi would probably be the one filling in there. Yeah. As long as he's available and fit. Calabria, is going to be playing on the right flank. I think Jimenez they're planning on keeping him, from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so that deal, they're working a fixture lower than the $5 million initially agreed to. So it looks like he's going to be staying on, but Real Madrid have a buyback clause that is higher than the initial one that they agreed to last summer. So yeah.
Right. So I can't see him starting because these are, very consequential games. So correct. Florenzi starting. I mean, if Milan, as long as they kind of keep going in the form that they have recently, most of the games in Serie A, an away game to Fiorentina, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky. If they draw a game, I wouldn't be shocked. Yeah. That's what I'll say. I hope they lose.
Yeah, Matt. And again, no Kalulu even as an option to be on the right side as well, to kind of like bear those minutes for Florenzi, because he's essentially the backup left back and right back at this moment in time. Doesn't seem like Pioli fully trusts Terracciano, Matt, just yet. So how are you feeling as well heading into this one? This is just like we've said, a very tough fixture.
I'm feeling the way I felt for most of the games recently, where I'm like, I feel like we'll get a win, but there's going to be instances where we're susceptible to errors. We look like we're going to maybe concede. It's going to be coming down to whether or not we bend but don't break, because we've had moments in matches, even against Verona, where it's 2-0 and Milan played pretty well, and then all of a sudden you get a great goal and you're like, here we go, Verona, they're going to somehow claw back to make this a draw, and we're going to drop points. And Milan obviously won that game. Yeah. But that's kind of how I feel like the season has gone, right? We, if the attack is doing well, then we can kind of cover some of the cracks that exist maybe in the midfield if it's getting overrun, or defensively if Malik Chow decides to have a disastrous performance again, or Mike Maignan is not his sharpest in goal. So I feel like we haven't had too many performances from top to bottom, back to front, where we've played a very collective, cohesive game where you're like, there's nothing to highlight. Everyone played strong, everyone did their job, and we had a comfortable win. The score lines can really skew people's opinions, like, oh, 3-1, we dominated Verona. And I'm like, maybe not. So when I look at everything, I look at Teo being out. I don't think we're a team that right now, when you look at, our depth, we're not really in positions where we can afford to lose Teo. Maybe in the midfield, you can be fine with it. Like if a Benacer's out, you still have numbers like Musa or Loftus-Cheek or Reinders to do the job. Where I feel when you look at, guys like Teo, where it's like, it's a clear cut, like we don't have the depth. So when you miss Teo, that has a direct impact on the entire team, the collective, but also Rafael Leao and what he's doing. So now you're at Fiorentina, you're thinking, let's blanket Rafa, let's prevent him from getting service into the strikers and kind of bank on that. With all that being said, I think that Milan have to be careful here, because Fiorentina do have some key players that can do some damage against Milan, specifically Nico Gonzalez out wide. He feels like their most dangerous player, tricky, good dribbler, was subject to transfer rumors, I think in January or last summer, to the Premier League. So he's very, very creative, and he can do a lot of damage for him. And obviously Giacomo Bonaventura, who's had this sort of renaissance at Fiorentina, and
now with the national
team. It's great to see, but at the same time, and I kind of have this sort of, is it going to be us that feel his wrath and he gets a big time performance, because he's aging like fine wine. So Milan have to be careful. I do think we'll get a result here. I'm not saying it's going to be this full throttle performance where we dominate, but I do think ultimately we'll get the job done in a victory. And at this phase of the season, Chris, you mentioned it's a consequential game. Like we need to have this game to kind of keep that momentum going into the latter fixtures, so we're not leaving it to the Juventus and Inter ones where we need to win something. So I think we'll do the job, and I feel good enough with the guys that we have, despite some injuries, to get the job done.
Prediction time, score line. Kush, you go first.
Keep in mind, they've lost the last 2 times that they went to Florence. The last 2 seasons away, they didn't pick up any points. Prediction time, I will say 1-2. Fiorentina 1, Milan 2. I don't want to predict a loss or a draw. That's too boring. So 2-1 Milan.
You stole mine, Kush.
Yeah, that was the scoreline I was going with too. Again, I feel like
all had the same one.
Yeah, I just feel like it's going to be one of those matches that's cagey, goes to the very end. Milan feels pressure, and I think ultimately they've been on the winning side of a lot of those performances of late. So I think that trend will continue here, and we'll get a tight win.
Yeah, I think Milan are going to be able to create a lot in this one. We always seem to concede. Fiorentina do a good job of creating, but they're really a poor finishing team.
Look at Belotti, Beltran, those guys.
There's some positives and pluses to it, but Fick looks great. I'm happy that he got some rest. It's pretty pathetic that Lewis Dunk is getting minutes for England, and we see what's going on over there. But happy to get him some rest. it's unfortunate we still haven't had that consistency in the back line despite the club being so healthy as of late. So I think that might be somewhat of an issue. I think this is a big Pulisic game, as you mentioned, because Leao was a little bit easier to defend when one of the best left backs in the world is not there with him. So I think Pulisic will have to step up in this, and as well as the midfield. Very curious to see what Pioli goes with. Again, Milan play Lecce in Serie A after this next week. Again, to kind of wrap it up on the final topic before we let everybody head on out here. Milan drew Roma in the Europa League. We kind of previewed it on the last podcast with myself and Matt. So we just want to kind of get Kush's thoughts on this draw and how Milan should be able to handle the rest of the tournament, because if they were to win this, it's likely that they do face Bayer Leverkusen, who still have yet to lost a game in any competition. It looked like they were about to get eliminated, and they came back with one of the all-time comebacks in Europa League that I could remember. There's not too many. But anyways, how do you feel about this draw? How do you feel about their potential in getting to the semifinal and potentially even going to the final and having a chance to win this trophy for the first time in club history? Much different side than they were under Mourinho so far.
Yeah, you know what? I don't want to interrupt you before when you brought up Pulisic. I just want to touch on that thing again. Sure. I'll come back to the Roma thing. I think we really need something out of Pulisic. Recently, a lot of his goals have been like a poacher's goal, like a number 9's goal, a lot of tap-ins. I think we need a little bit more creativity coming all the way from the right flank, driving into the box and actually creating something for himself or a teammate too, because we're kind of missing that recently at least. So it's going to be an important game for Pulisic for sure in the absence of Theo and Leao combo. So yeah, that's that. Now with Roma, I don't know, man. It's bizarre. You know, the turnaround for Roma is truly wild to see. It's not the first time that we've seen this. You know, teams after, you know, Mourinho's departure, somehow they just turn something on and start playing differently. I really don't know what to say. We've beaten them both times this season, but seeing their recent turnaround, you almost get the sense that, wait, is something different going to happen now? I think Milan has the superior quality when it comes to the team itself. I think they're much more balanced. Roma can also be partially distracted because this is the part that I was actually, you know what? I guess we're going to come back to that after is the whole possibility of them winning it or not. But I think Roma's going to be distracted by their push to make it into the Champions League next season. And I think those things, hopefully, not that you want to rely on that, but I feel like those can go in your benefit. I think Milan should get past Roma. Really, they should manage that.
That's something that Matt and I discussed on the last podcast, was Roma's fixtures outside of, you know, these Europa League ones are very difficult. And their best path to make it to the Champions League next year is through the league. The league is substantially weaker than it was last year. It doesn't matter who you're talking to. Like, Inter is fantastic. We know that. Napoli was fantastic last year. But outside of looking at it, Lazio have regressed heavily. Roma's more or less the same. It's just a different points situation. Milan are actually better, despite a lot of things. The defense is terrible. But with that, it's sort of like, okay, from their perspective, they have to beat Milan over both legs, a team that they have not beaten in a couple of years now. And then on top of it, they have to go and face potentially Bayer Leverkusen and then go face Liverpool in a final. There's no chance that they pull that off. Well, not no chance. It's highly unlikely. Bove already was injured for them over the international break. They have a decent squad enough to pick up the points in Serie A. But I think you're right, Kush, and even Matt was right to say this too, because this was the point that he brought up. Go and check the clip out on the channel. This is not really a priority for them, considering what is being weighed here. Because say they do miss Champions League, right, guys? They're fucked financially again. So they really don't have many options here. And especially with a Tammy Abraham coming back, and they have to make that decision on De Rossi to keep him or not. Matt, what do you think here? Do you think they kind of actually focus on Serie A more or less? I know you've kind of thought that already.
I think they do. I mean, I'm not going to go through the entire schedule, but even the games against, you know, not top 5-6 teams, which they have a handful there, they still have games against teams that are vying for salvation in Serie A. I mean, you have the Udinese game where that's going to require you to exhaust a lot of resources. You know, so now the conversation becomes like, hey, do we give Dybala 90 in this or Lukaku 90 in this match, knowing we have a Europa League game coming? And it's even navigating that part of the conversation where De Rossi has to look and say, like, I need Dybala for as healthy as possible the rest of the way. How much can I afford to put him out there and run a risk of him having a setback or getting injured? And, you mentioned what's at stake here for Roma. I mean, I don't think that this has, I think we'll have to wait and see how everything plays out. But I think De Rossi's done enough, in my view, to keep the job, assuming they just completely fall apart and they don't get anything, from the rest of the season. But Lukaku, like the Lukaku loan, Dybala obviously is still going strong, but they have a lot of question marks. Kush mentioned their balance is not on the same page as Milan's. So I think that they'd be wise to prioritize Serie A. Now, there could be 5 spots coming from Serie A that go into the Champions League. So right now, I think they do sit 5th. So technically, they would be in. But that can change. So I feel good about the draw. As we mentioned in our previous podcast, I feel like Milan will have enough in the tank. They've done enough in the league to put themselves in a position where they can afford to rotate and prioritize these matches again in the Europa League. So I feel pretty good. Again, I'm not going to say they're going to trounce Roma, but I think their body of work and their recent record against them suggests that we'll get the job done and we'll find a way to move to the semifinal.
Yeah, definitely. Now for the final topic in question. Can Milan win Europa League? Kush. This is a very difficult path.
This is the part that I was going to talk about. Was all 3 teams have other competitions that they're trying to win. And that's the best part for Milan, I guess. We know there's no chance of winning the Scudetto. So really it's holding on to second place and just getting past one team after the other. Roma have their limitations with want to make top 5 or top 4. Bayer Leverkusen might be the first team to beat Bayern in a decade in winning the Bundesliga. So they have other priorities. And then Liverpool is neck and neck with Arsenal and Manchester City in the Premier League. So really you have 3 teams that have so many other commitments and real commitments, real financial implications, real honor implications. That's something that Milan can benefit off of. Now, I think Liverpool is still the team to beat. Every time that I've seen them play, they're ridiculously good.
Yeah.
Bayer Leverkusen is also a very good team. The way that they came back against, I think it was Karabakh, right? And
Correct,
the way that they came back in injury time was amazing. And I believed in them to the point that I put a little bit of, cash on them. And
shout out to Tonali. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it's possible. Yeah, Milan can win it.
Matt, anything can happen in a final, but they have to get there. 2 legs with Leverkusen. They haven't lost a game yet. Milan's defense is untrustworthy. That's the biggest issue here. Can they stop 2 of the most high-powered offenses in all of Europe? We're talking about a team that is yet to lose a game, okay? And they're winning a league that Bayern hasn't lost in over a decade. We're going to be talking about this side for years to come. They could get the fake treble. I don't consider it the real treble because the Champions League is a completely different level of winning. But with that, just to beat Roma, not easy. Then you have to face the Leverkusen. Anything can happen in a final. Maybe we do a reverse 2005. Would be fucking incredible. Still won't make up for it. But again, can they do this?
Let me just say, you guys see me smirking for those who are, you guys obviously were recording this and people who are watching on YouTube. The audio listeners are not seeing this, but I'm almost kind of grinning because, we're asking the question, can they win the Europa League? And I'm thinking to myself, man, if we somehow manage to win the Europa League, it's going to be a bad day to be a Stefano Pioli hater. I don't know, I'm kind of conflicted and I'm kind of just on the edge of my seat with it because we've had moments where we look like we can play with some of the top teams. I mean, even in their Champions League, we feel like we were hard done by some pretty bad results, but we played fantastic against PSG. We played pretty good games against Newcastle, where we should have been into that round of 16. So we have that capability that if we get guys back healthy, if Rafa shifts into another gear that we know he's capable of doing at this point of the season, Pulisic is in fine form. Ruben Loftus-Cheek has scored the most goals in a single season in his entire career. Things can align for Milan to at least get to a final. And over one match, 90 minutes, you never quite know how things are going to shake up. So I'm not going to rule it out. I still feel, to you guys' points, like Liverpool is the consensus favorite. You have to respect the fact that, they're in a gridlock for the title in the Premier League with two really great teams in Arsenal and City. And Leverkusen, until they're beaten.
How did they rebound from it too? I'm pretty curious to see.
I mean, even a team like Leverkusen, right? If let's say we were to get past Roma, right, and we were to confront Leverkusen, maybe they get kicked in the teeth and they do lose a game. How does that shake things up? I mean, they've had to come back through some of their Europa League games and in some fashion to move past. Eventually, they're going to have to lose a game or somewhere. I would assume. Yeah. How do they respond from that? So I'm not going to rule it out. I think if Milan can catch fire, I think they can find themselves in a great position. And again, I just kind of savor the opportunity to see what would unfold on Twitter, with Milan Twitter, if Stefano Pioli finds himself in a Europa League final against Liverpool and somehow we win that.
He stays.
I mean, if Karabakh can almost beat Leverkusen, why can't Milan definitely beat Leverkusen? It's like that.
Well, you're right too, because also just one thing we didn't mention with that, Leverkusen were up a man. There was a red card that happened. Yeah. So that really kind of pushed that into that. Again, they just got the draw on that first leg too. That happened in stoppage time. They're vulnerable. Obviously, Milan are vulnerable. Haven't quite seen that yet with Liverpool. But again, all bets are off come the final. So we'll see what happens. So anyways, we're winding on down here because
you're asking about Pioli. I think we have to at least give 1 minute to that.
So this has been a topic of conversation. It was asked on Sempre Milan. I actually just edited the clip for them. So Gregory Peck was the guy who asked the question, and he essentially said Milan are playing better than they were in Serie A last year. Obviously, no excuses with Inter running away with the title. But if Milan were to finish second and Pioli and Milan somehow managed to win Europa League, does he stay? I say, yeah, he's going to stay. Yeah. I think he deserves to stay at that point because I don't love the coaching options that are out there that are feasible for Milan. Again, feasible that are going to happen, right? Antonio Conte is just not walking through that door, guys. So with that, I think he stays, yes. And to be honest with you, he would deserve it. As much as I have gripes against him, he kind of deserves it in that sense if he were to pull that off.
I mean, if he wins it, he'll be the greatest Milan coach since Carlo Ancelotti. You would have to say that, won a title and then won Europa League. Who else is
the bar is on the floor. It's really just Max Allegri and
but the question is,
actually, wait, no, that's not true. Montella won the Super Cups.
Right. And Allegri was the only one. The question for you guys is, if he makes the final and then he loses, does he still deserve to stay? Second place in Serie A, second place in Europa League.
Matt, you could go first with that one.
Whether I think he deserves to stay is different than he will stay. I think that regardless of where we kind of end up as second in the season or second in the table, and then to your hypothetical second in Europa League, I think people will still feel like we do need to make a change. But I think it makes the conversation a little bit more interesting, right? Because I'm looking at the coaching options and I'm like, there are real possibilities that you won't really have many options to choose from. Italiano could go to a Napoli. You might have a Conte who continues to hold out, and his demands are. Maybe Cardinal and Ferlani and everyone involved think like we can't cater to his needs. And then it becomes a conversation of, can you maybe get Thiago Motta to leave Bologna if they do crack into the top four? Maybe I want to play in the Champions League. So Milan might be in a position where, whether we like it or not, Pioli is the right guy, just for the simple fact that the options are very limited and he's safe and he's under contract until 2025. So I think that's kind of where I think Milan could be headed in this whole situation. But yeah, I think that I think if we finish second in the table, there is some weight to that derby. I think we can't get obliterated. If we get absolutely trounced and we have second Europa League, second table, I think that people are still going to be like, guys, we can't be getting battered by Inter.
Especially if there's the potential that they not only clinch it during the derby, or they have to do a guard of honor for it.
Oh man,
that's such a sour taste in fans' mouths. I mean, listen. Inter choked it away. They've won one Champions League since the Nixon administration. I don't want to hear about how incredible this super team is. It's eerily similar to Napoli last year, a team that they openly mock.
Yeah.
Okay. Congratulations, you ran away.
And
with
I'll say one thing: this people have this obsession with the second star and the second star, and in my head, I'm like, you do realize it's just 20, right? Like we still have 19. It's not like the second star means you suddenly have 32. It's just one more title, so it's not the biggest deal. Milan's going to win one more, and they'll have the second star too.
They coughed it up the year before. We'll see what happens with Sunig. There's a lot of stuff ongoing with that. Oaktree might be taking that over. There's rumors of them trying to extend this current loan at a much higher interest. It's just a bunch of question marks there. If they get taken over by different ownership, say Oaktree takes over, they're not going to be doing the same type of philosophy that Inter has been doing. They want to wipe out all of these debts, and they would want to flip the club, right? There's not going to be this sort of path that they're just going to keep on trying to win while amassing more debt. They're only doing that because Suning and Inter are willing to do that. It's different when a financial giant like Oaktree comes in. They're going to be weighing things differently. It's going to be more similar to the way Elliott were under Milan. So I wouldn't be too shocked with that. That'll also be coming in with cutting wages, and cutting wages means you sell players or you let players go. So I'm just saying that that's up in the air. A lot of things can change for and against Milan and for and against Inter in the time coming. Kush, we love you, brother. We are so happy for all your success. 100 subscribers, 1,000 subscribers, and soon to be 10K, probably by the end of April, maybe. Who knows? As long as Pulisic keeps scoring, I think both of us are going to have a lot more.
That's my cash cow.
Yeah, so anything exciting coming up on the channel that everybody may or may not know already, because you do so much over the course of time. You stream every now and then whenever you get the chance as well.
Yeah. I'll stream on occasion, but I think most of the feature that everyone waits for is the rumor reel in the transfer window. I just randomly came up with it one day while thinking, I was like, I wonder if this news story is like, is that a rumor or is it real? And I was like, wait, that should be an episode. Boom. Now I can make magic. Now I can talk about anybody. I can talk about Neymar too, and no one will say it's it's clickbait.
True.
I'm just saying he's on the thumbnail, but it's a rumor. So yeah, I think I like that one too in the summertime. It's fun.
Awesome. Yeah. Again, guys, at Football Kush on YouTube. Check out the social medias. I think you're more active on Twitter than anywhere else.
Yeah.
Aside from YouTube. So yeah, go and subscribe if you have not already. Santangelo, go ahead and plug all your stuff, good sir.
Follow me on Twitter at Matt_Santangelo. Been a little bit cold on the writing front lately. Just life. You guys can attest to that. It gets in the way. As you get older, it's tougher to sit down and just commit hours to writing. So I'm hoping to get back into it soon, but still doing obviously the content with Martino. So make sure you guys follow our podcast, That Milan Podcast, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Music, and wherever podcasts can be found. And also be sure to like, subscribe, all that good stuff on YouTube. We do really appreciate all the support we've been receiving of late, especially the listeners. We're getting most of our audience listening to the entire episode, which in this day and age, having people commit to an entire 45-minute episode all at one sitting is not easy, given all the vices and distractions. So we do really appreciate the support we continue to get.
Yeah. So much great support from all of you, new fans, old fans, over the years. So it's great to see. And things are only going to go up from here. Again, plenty of exciting stuff down the road, plenty of games left this season as well. So hopefully we'll get to talk to Kush one more time before the season ends and we start getting ramped up for rumor or real this summer, because there's going to be a lot of transfer news with that. Going to go live after the match against Fiorentina. So tune into the channel here. This will be my last weekend match that I'm going to be able to watch, unfortunately, live for the next couple of months. Actually, really the rest of the season. So kind of unfortunate to say on my end. But again, you guys have Kush's channel to go and check it out. You have Matt's Twitter. You could go see Old Hard Rossonero. Sempre Milan's podcast, obviously, they come out weekly that you guys can go and check out. Coast to Coast with Gio and Fabio, and the Milan Weekly podcast as well. If I'm drawing a blank on anyone else, Kush or Matt, let me know. I think that's pretty much everyone that does Milan content that's out there.
I know Max Lombardia and
Yes, Max and Gino.
Yeah,
I
Gino.
always forget something there. But again, go and check out their podcast as well. There's so many great people that you can interact with on Milan Twitter and Milan socials as opposed to what you see on my timeline. So again, we appreciate you guys. We love you so much. Kush, thanks for joining us. Santangelo, always great to see you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for having me again.
Of course.
Take care.
Always.